Well, hello and welcome to Jim Lemaster's description of the Zachman architecture framework. This is for my CS 847 Enterprise Systems Architecture and Planning. So hello to everyone that's never seen me before, and hello particularly to Dr. Euxter, who as far as I know hasn't heard me before. So let's see what else we've got going here. For the Zachman Enterprise Architecture Framework, I'm supposed to do this in 5 minutes, but I am how can we say it here, a long-winded SOB, so I may extend beyond that. I'll try and keep it down as much as possible. What is it? The Zachman framework is a schema. It describes the intersection between two common historical classifications, primitive interrogatives and reification. The primitive interrogatives are the ones that we are most familiar with, as our 7 or 6 friends from journalism. What, how, when, who, where, and why. The reification, which is the transformation from an abstract idea into a real instance, is labeled by Mr. Zachman as identification, definition, representation, specification, configuration, and instantiation, or instance. So, really, what is it? More than anything else, it's a theory postulating a common set of structured objects within an enterprise. Now, one thing I have to tell you right here is none of this stuff is my own work. Everything is either directly or inspired by Dr. Zachman's work at zachman.org, and I have pulled down the information and the pictures by registering there, and they are the ones that he allows people to use, so it should not be a real problem. However, I just want you to know that this is not my work. I am simply parroting the work of either Dr. Zachman himself or some of the folks he has on the blogs there. So, what is it not? It is not a methodology or a process for creating the objects, the ones we talked about, the structured objects within the enterprise. What it is an established set of definitions so everyone can use the same thing. And as such, it forms the basis for the enterprise architecture. Okay? What am I doing here? There we are. Okay. And look, I have a little picture up in the corner. The Zachman framework is visually represented as a two-dimensional table of 6 rows and 6 columns for a total of 36 cells or aspects, also called perspectives or views. Across the top go the primitive interrogatives: what, how, when, who, where, and why. It is the integration of the answers to these questions that provides the comprehensive descriptions of the complex objects within the architecture. Along the sides go the reification titles, describing the transformation of the abstract objects: identification, definition, representation, specification, configuration, instantiation. Now, what it looks like is this. This is basically, although this one is from Dr. Zachman's website, this is basically what we have in our textbook. However, thing that you have to realize is this is the first published version, which is actually from about 2001, which means it's a little bit behind on what's going. But what you have across the top is we have our primitives in slightly different order: what, how, where, who, when, and why. Down the side, with slightly different names, we have our reification transformation process. Starting at the top, we have the scope associated with the planner. We have the enterprise model with the I lost that one out on there. The system model, the technology model, and the detailed representations. You might note we also have a couple of extras. We have some other names as we go through. Let's take a look at this in a little bit more detail. Okay. Across the top, we have our columns of what, also associated with data to describe the entities involved in each perspective. How, or functions, the functions within this perspective. Where, network, the major business geographic locations, sites within a logistic network, system nodes, or so forth. Who, the people and the relationships within the enterprise. One of the things you have to think about is authority is represented vertically. The closer to the top you are, the closer to the top you are in the corporate hierarchy. The closer to the bottom you are, the closer you are to the bottom of the hierarchy. When or time, the time or temporal relationships between the events as described by the objects and the processes that we have here. And finally, why, or the motivation. The motivations, defined as the goals, objectives, business plans, knowledge, architecture, and design of the enterprise. Along the side, we have our rows, come down as we go. Scope, definitions, business model, representation. I've got two definitions here. I've got an error at some point. Your business model, your system model, showing the data elements, your technology model, the constraints of the tools and the technology, the components, individual system modules, and finally the working system or the instantiation of the operational systems. This part allows us to kind of go to one other point. Taking the alternate view of looking at what we have. We have the views or aspects down the side. Planner, owner, designer, builder, integrator, and user. This was fairly common with different sections. Across the top for the individual columns, we have data, function, network, people, time, and motive. This kind of made it a little bit easier for everyone to see what was going on and for the non-IT folks to see the different ways that we're actually looking at it. However, this still caused some different problems. One of the things I thought was kind of funny, this is a bit of a quote from Dr. Zachman. He said that the biggest problem he had with people using his framework was the fact that the first column said data. As soon as any of the business people saw the first column of data, they threw it across the table to the IT guys. Says, "Oh, just for you guys." He said he didn't understand why people were constantly confusing his enterprise architecture with nothing but IT architecture. Well, let's see. He developed it in the 80s when he was working for IBM. It was adopted by IBM to help their different customers, and so it was presented from IBM standpoint. Kind of odd that they would think that IBM would only be interested in hardware architecture. But anyway. So, now, since that version, there's been a new version that came out about 2008, which I'm kind of amazed because the textbook should have really probably picked up on this one. But anyway, what is move things around a little bit. You might note that there's no word data on this one at all. We have our substantiation or reification going down the left side. On the right side, we have who it is supposedly directed at. And across the top, we have only our interrogatives. What, how, where, who, when, and how. However, down at the bottom now, we have our new set of classifications on giving an example of what we're looking for. What is the inventory of what we're looking at? How are our processes? Where is our network? Who, the organizations? When is the timing? And why still is motivation? But down the left-hand side, instead of the ones we had before, we have scope, business, system, technology, components, and operations. The people these are directed at are down the right-hand side. Strategists at the top, executive leaders, architects, engineers, technicians, and workers. You can take this as a little bit different than, let's take a look at what we had up here. Workers, users, kind of the same thing, but that's really a computer term. integrator, builder, designer, owner. Owner is who? That was one of the problems. Who is the owner of the enterprise architecture? The company is the owner of the enterprise architecture, not IT. Okay, so this, he hoped, would clear things out. Not completely, though. There was still a bunch of, in his opinion, confusion. So, last year, after having basically bought back all the copyrights and everything for his work, he produced and put out what he now calls the Zachman framework for enterprise architecture, what he's calling the enterprise ontology. And by ontology, he's talking about entire system as opposed to just the architecture. Down the left-hand side, he describes which view each line is for. Once again, we've lost all data, we've lost all the things. So across the top, we have what, how, where, who, when, and why. Who it is working for or directed toward is along the left-hand side. Executive view, business management view, architect's view, engineer's view, technician's view, and the enterprise view, or once again, kind of what we have out there. So our workers are gone, our planners are gone, but we still have our architects, our engineers, and our technicians, but we're bringing in much more of corporate management. Now, along the right-hand side, we have a new set that are telling us what concepts these are being directed toward. The executive view is directed toward the scope, or the scope concepts of the business. Along just below that is the business concepts. Obviously, business management is most worried about business concepts. System logic is for the architect. Technology and physics are for the engineer. The tool components are for the technicians, and the actual operations instances are for the enterprise view, the enterprise itself. And across the bottom, we have just about the same thing, but a little bit different. Inventory under what, process under how. Where is now described as the distribution of what we have. Who is not defined as just the people and the relationships, but as the responsibilities. So as before, we said that our amount of authority went from top to bottom. Now we're looking at our responsibilities going from top to bottom. Most responsible is the executives. Least responsible is the technician. I'm not sure exactly how the enterprise view fits in that, but possibly I'll be able to find that as I read more. When now refers to timing, and why is still on our motivation. Now, I hope this has helped out. Let's summarize what I've gone over. I have described what the Zachman framework is and is not. It is not a process. It is, and now call it an ontology, it is now a naming function showing and defining all the complex objects inside a corporation. We stepped through the Zachman framework matrix. We showed the new Zachman framework version 2 and version 3 from 2011, and I let you see my beautiful face and hear my wonderful voice. I hope we get to do this again sometime, but if not, I wish you a good evening. I hope you had a good week and a good Mother's Day, and this is Jim Lemaster signing off. I am out of here.